essential that we understand this process before we sell our natural resources to the highest bidder. We're putting our drinking water possibly at risk, and once the water is contaminated, it's very difficult to restore it to a healthy level. And you know, I am reminded, I've been thinking a lot about Rachel Carson. She wrote Silent Spring, and it was decades ago, and she first alerted people on the dangers of DDT, and it took a long time before everyone in the science and the research caught up and knew that we needed to ban DDT. And when that happened, farming and agriculture did not cease to exist. Rather, improvements were made in the technology and the safety of the products that they used. And today we continue to have bald eagles because they were being exterminated by DDT at that point. So I think it's really important that prevention, that we start at a place right now and ask the detailed questions, get the answers to those, so that we can continue to have a safe and healthy Ohio that also is creating jobs and working on new technology for energy. And with that, I'd like to turn it over. I'd like to call Cheryl John Cox up from the Buckeye Forest Council.
Thank you. Thank you, representatives, for asking me to be here today. I'm really honored to be able to speak to you about this legislation. I'd like to start off by reading a paragraph from a local manager of soil, of water resources, of drinking water resources and sewage treatment in Northeast Ohio. She wrote to me and said that she had been referred to ODNR officials to MSDS sheets on the ODNR website to find which chemicals were in fracking fluids. Once I got to the website, however, I noticed that the chemicals were listed by supplier, not by driller, and that chemical information is posted after well completion. As a result, our village would not know which chemicals to test for before any drilling occurred to prove that they had not been there previously. I commend legislatures for their willingness to take these early actions to make sure that Ohio is doing this right and that we are not suffering the consequences that have been suffered in other states. We are fortunate enough to live in the great breadbasket of the United States, and different parts of the world indeed depend on the resources that we are able to provide for families all across the country. We cannot, and across the world, we cannot afford to irreparably contaminate this precious resource, because the 5,000 on average gallons that are used to hydrofrack a well are accompanied by as much as 40,000 pounds of chemicals according to US EPA. And these are very toxic chemicals that are not being, that information is not currently being released to the public. So every time they put 40,000 pounds of chemicals into the ground and 5 million gallons of water, only a portion of that actually comes back up. A lot of that remains in the ground. And when that water comes back up, the stuff that does come back up often picks up radioactivity like we were talking about. And this waste is now allowed to be injected into Class 2 wells that are neither designed to be a reservoir for chemicals nor radioactive materials. It is a very, very serious concern. Industry has stated that they would like to drill 4,000 wells in Ohio by 2015. I've done the math. That's 7.6 trillion gallons of water when you take into consideration that each of these wells can be drilled multiple times. And there is no requirement currently that would require them to know the source of that water. So I think this bill is very important. I would encourage the legislature to please pass it as soon as they can. And I think that this is the first step. These are the first steps that we need to take to protect the citizens of the state of Ohio. Because indeed, not only is this practice exempted from the Safe Drinking Water Act, Act, which the state of Alabama sued the US EPA in 1997 in order for the Safe Drinking Water Act to apply, and then it was taken away by the Halliburton loophole. But it is also exempt from the Resource Recovery and Conservation Act, which regulates disclosure and disposal of hazardous chemicals. Emergency Planning and Community Right to Know Act, the Clean Water Act exemption for stormwater controls, and the Clean Air Act because of the toxic emissions such as benzene, toluene, and other carcinogens that are off-gassed during this process. So I think that it's very important that we're taking these steps. We have a long way to go in order to protect the citizens of our great state of Ohio, and I look forward to working with the legislators that have asked me to join them today in order to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Now Tish O'Dell is going to join us. She has photos. She also has a personal experience and a personal story to talk about. And so I'm just going to call her forward. We save the best for last, obviously. I think she'll be more compelling than anyone can because she's actually living this. So thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thanks for no pressure there.
Oh, sorry.
I want to thank both of you for inviting me here today because I'm from up north in Cuyahoga County, Cleveland area, and this is going on where I live, and we were starting to feel like no one down here cared. And so that is why I brought pictures today. I brought pictures because I'm a resident of a once quiet and peaceful suburb just 11 miles south of Cleveland, and I wanted to show you what greed looks like. Okay, these are some photos. I don't know how well they'll come up on your cameras, but I wanted to show you how close these are to homes. And I'll leave them up here if you want to come look. This one's really interesting because, whoops, I'm sorry. There's bicycles in the corner, and there's also a playground when you see the longer view. This one here shows you also how close this is to actually a home. Wooded backyards are being cleared to make way for an industrial process that adds toxic chemicals to both the air and soil, noise pollution from the drilling process and continuous truck traffic, and there's strange workers at all times of the day in our backyards, and an ugliness that words cannot do justice to. You really have to look at these photos. When I first became aware of this issue by attending a city council meeting, I could not believe the stories I heard from resident after resident that these were actually going on in my little peaceful town. As I started to do my research, though, I was appalled to find out not only were neighbors being pitted against neighbors over signing leases, but that our city and local officials were also selling out their residents by signing leases which they gave up city streets to make up the required acreage to drill a well. Our community had only 3 wells in 2003, and now in 2011 we're just a well or two shy of 90, and we only have 13 square miles. Our fire department is purchasing gas analyzers and practicing mock oil well explosions and spills with surrounding cities. Our local elected officials and state government officials have made it easy for the oil and gas companies to drill in our community, and the proliferation of wells is wreaking havoc on my hometown. Just because we all acknowledge a need for energy doesn't mean we want to turn our neighborhoods into oil fields and industrial sites. The fear factor among many residents in our community is having a detrimental effect on all of us. We were all naive to think that our government representatives who took an oath to protect the public health and safety of our community, state, and country would be taken seriously, and so that's why I really appreciate you both doing this. Again, greed for money seems to have clouded many officials along the way. I truly believe that the oil and gas industry, though, has manipulated this from the beginning, and they knew that greed would work in their favor. First, they made campaign contributions to candidates running for office all the way down to a local level in my little community. They then entered the community and immediately targeted cities, churches, and schools. These are all organizations that are well aware of that they're always looking for funds to operate, and they probably wouldn't ask a lot of questions. So they placed wells first next to City Hall, churches placed them next to picnic areas, and schools placed them next to playgrounds. The location of these wells, without even realizing it, then sent a quiet subliminal message to the residents of the community that this must be safe. The landmen then went out in our community and started knocking on doors. They promised lots of money and royalties. They told the people it was totally safe because the state regulates drilling, and that if a resident showed any sign of reluctance, then they started to bully them. They would threaten them that the well will go in anyway, whether you want it or not, and you won't get any money. They would lie and tell them all of their neighbors had already signed and that they were the last holdout. Since there are no regulations for public posting of information regarding leases or what is going to go on in your backyard, residents had nowhere to turn. This is why this bill is so important. It is at least a start in the right direction to give residents information. Currently, many residents don't even know that a well is going to be drilled near them until they hear and see the trees being cleared. This is wrong. For many of us, our homes are our biggest investment. We did not purchase a home in an industrial zoned area. We purchased a home in residentially zoned areas. We didn't think we would have to worry about explosions, air pollution, and toxic chemicals being released or spilled near our homes. However, we all know that the more wells that go in, the greater the risk of an accident happening. To prove this point, I just want to give you a few recent examples of accidents that have actually occurred in our neighborhoods. In the fall of 2008, elementary students were out at recess at Valley Vista Elementary School when a recess aide noticed a loud noise and then dust around the well. The well was spraying an oil-like substance both inside and outside of the fenced area. The school administrators contacted the oil company and not the fire department because, as most leases state, that's what they're to do. Whenever there's a well, any type of an accident, incident, you're supposed to contact the oil company. The oil company came out, started cleaning up the site, and to this date, there is still no hard copy of this incident on file with the school system, the city fire department, or the police department. When we asked the ODNR for a violation report of this incident at the school, they have no violations on record. How do I or other residents even know that this incident occurred? Because there were children and teachers' aides outside at recess on the playground. The school contacted by reverse 911 the families who had students at this school, but other homeowners within the vicinity of this accident were not notified. I do have a part of the report. This is the only documentation. It's from the ODNR because they were forced to at this point. But in their report, they do say that the dust was apparently an oil water spray which coated the pumping unit, a majority of the board-on-board fence surrounding the well, and was carried by the wind to the east and impacted trees and ground cover approximately 100 feet downwind. So that was at an elementary school. Another incident occurred just west of us, but it was more gradual. Residents complained of ill health, including headaches, nausea, and bad smells in the vicinity of their homes. After a federal safety agency did an analysis of the land and water, the report states that the combustible gas levels measured through screening and analytical methods at homes along Katy Road are a physical hazard. Levels of gases were detected with an explosive range or above at 2 wellheads and near explosive levels in 2 basements. Residents could also expect to experience potential non-life-threatening effects from the levels of methane and other combustible gases detected in their water wells, including dizziness, headaches, nausea, and fatigue. Would you want to live there?